Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Belly to Belly. And we're here today to talk about why do partner networks fail long before anyone knows they've failed. And we're joined by great friend Chris Messina from QuarqAI. How are you, Chris?
Doing well, thank you. Happy to be here.
It's great to be with you. So this is a very provocative headline. Why do partner networks fail long before anyone knows they've failed? So what's the problem? What do we see as the problem here?
Well, the major problem is that we continue to treat partner networks and partnerships like first order problems. Like it's the vending machine issue. You put a quarter in, you get the leads that come out. Well, the reality of partnerships is they exist predominantly between the margins. It's not the input, which is the lead, which is actually one of the outputs, nor is it the revenue. It's everything that happens in between. And every partner network, ecosystem, channel, whatever you want to call it, is legitimately an ecosystem. Like ecosystem is the way that the best way to describe it. And why do they fail long before anybody realizes it? If you look at a failing ecosystem, the problems, the indicators, you look at a failing company, you look at investments, those indicators happen long before anybody realizes it. Like when a relationship breaks down, it's the things that happen beforehand. By the time you get to when somebody says, I want a divorce, it's over. Like you might try and rescue it at that point, but you've already hit these points of exploitation. We can get into that in a second too, that have gone so far that there is really no redeeming that thing. They already feel like it's time to leave. And so the fact of the matter is we don't monitor for exploitation, positive and negative, within our ecosystems. And by not doing that, we wind up with extremely unbalanced relationships. And whenever you have an unbalanced relationship, even if it's only perceptual, it's going to break down because perception is reality. If I feel like you're not giving me what I want or vice versa, I'm going to go find somebody else.
I hear quite often the sort of that the 80-20 rule that 20% of partners drive 80% of the results. And my sense is you have a different view of that.
Yeah, so that number is BS. And especially as you get into the larger enterprises, concentration gets heavier and heavier. I mean, Salesforce, for instance, right now, they've got 3,700 ISV partners. They're concentrated with about 50 of them. Like about 95% of the revenue comes from 50. That's not 80-20. In fact, you go into some of these even larger ecosystems and speaking with Google and Microsoft, it's more like 98-2. Like that trailing end, they trickle in, but the vast majority is coming from a specific number of partners. And here's where we really screw that up, is with that concentration risk, is we're not paying attention to what's happening with them 10 steps down the road like we are every other investment. We're just saying, are they giving me leads or not? Are they engaging with me or not? Well, who cares? Like, great, if they're engaging with me, but they've got problems 3 steps down the road that are going to hit me in my P&L, I better freaking know that.
So what do you mean by that? What types of problems might manifest?
Yeah, think about how you may have a large channel partner who is a strong distribution engine, and maybe you have a couple of them, right? And they all sit in that same general area. Well, if 2 steps down the road, their supply chain, they've got a supply chain issue with one of their partners that's going to impact a partner and then another partner and then them, right? If we're not paying attention to that, that is going to hit us in the P&L, period. End of story. Guess what it doesn't show up on? The P&L. The partner does not exist on anyone's P&L. They don't look at whoever that is, whether it's Oracle or they don't look at that. And what other investment criteria do we do that with? If I'm putting money into stocks, whether I love or hate Elon Musk, if Tesla's part of my portfolio and I'm a portfolio manager, my job is to understand the nth degree inputs that are going to create a ripple effect into my portfolio. That's how partnerships actually work, more like investments and investment evaluation criteria than they do these tactical execution things that, like, look, we have a 90+% failure rate. And over year, it's about 85 to 90. Extend that to 24 to 36 months, it's probably pretty close to 100, right? And that's because we fail to meet expectations, not because we actually fail. And so by understanding how these investments actually work and not just looking at leads and revenue, we start to get a real understanding as to what is the contribution value and what is the extraction cost. Those are the things we need to understand if we actually want to understand what we do. Because here's one other thing that no channel or partner person can tell you right now. Not a single person can tell you what the I is in their ROI. So they effectively don't have it because you're pulling from product marketing, sales, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're pulling resources from all over the place. But the only costs you actually track are yours. So nobody actually knows what you're worth. And your CFO is going, yep, I don't get it. Sorry, bye.
Right. And so, yeah, so it's really, you're taking, it sounds like, a much more 360 view of both the sort of cost of relationship and the much longer view of in terms of impact of that cost or impact of that investment.
Yeah, and it's looking at it in two different veins. It's looking at it as, think about what investors look at. They look at net present value. I need to know what my business is worth today. Well, we have to be able to understand that when it comes to our partnership cost. First, we have to understand how much we cost, how much are we extracting, and all in, how much are we getting from marketing, from sales, from product, from, what's that ROI? Where are we placing investments in? We have to understand what I can prove. I also need to understand what I can infer. Net present value includes stuff like pipeline and things that isn't actual dollars, but it's likely dollars. So what else can I infer there? But even more important than that, if that's your CFO number. That's what the CFO cares about. What's happening today? How do I keep this thing afloat? Your CEO, your investor, your CRO, they care about that risk, that upside number. And so modeling out that risk, just like you would credit risk, just like you would portfolio risk, same exact thing. And so the big difference is not just measuring linearly, which, by the way, we live inside of everybody else's metrics, tools, et cetera, et cetera. So we also have a massive get off my lawn problem. So we kind of need our own thing in the first place. But by measuring this way, we're not just looking at a 360 view. Like partnerships are not 360, they're omnidirectional. They move in every possible direction. And that's what AI gives us the capability of doing. Not looking at those linear metrics, but looking at the edges of the ecosystem and understanding where the value is being exchanged on the edges that contribute and actually create the value. And what is value? It's revenue. Like, so if you can trace all that back to revenue, and I can show you empirically how X, Y, and Z contributed to this outcome, then it gets a lot easier to manage an ecosystem. You're no longer managing it like a tactical execution play. It becomes a portfolio management play. I start thinking about it in terms of investment. Where do I put my dollars? I have a finite amount of resources for partnerships. How do I actually make them work? And how do I convince the people above me or my peers that I actually should exist without having to spend an entire, like I joke about we have two full-time jobs. One is our full-time job and one is proving that we should have a job. And so my job is to try and take that second one away.
Yeah, well, I actually had a really interesting chat with a VP of partnerships for Cisco a few weeks back. And, one of the things he said is that 90% of their sales go through partners, which based on what you're saying, it could be 5 or 10 or 50 partners that create that value. But based on what you're saying, there's huge vulnerability of a vast majority of that revenue unless you have these kinds of leading indicators and metrics.
That's exactly, like, where else do we treat any part of an organization, whether it's personal, business, like one amorphous blob? That's how we treat our channels. It's like an amorphous blob of lead gen and revenue. Like, it's all going to look the same. Well, think about even the problem of replicability in partnerships. Like, you and I may work together. I use the example of Gong, Sales, Loft, and Outreach. I used to work with them, all three as partners. On paper, if I don't know who any of them are, same company, right? If I'm going to evaluate them as an ICP, that's what I'm looking at. Relatively similar sizes, similar offerings, et cetera. From a partnership standpoint, the three of them were entirely different. And so like SalesLoft was great at going to market. They sucked at integrations. Outreach was the opposite. And Gong was the one that was just going to be the scrappy gorilla, do whatever they could. Three very different ways of partnering, three very different ways of adding value. But to my C-suite at the time, like, where are the leads? They're not lead gen engines. Outreach is an amplification engine through the integrations that they can do. SalesLoft can be the lead, can help create leads because they want to go to market together. And so once you understand how these organizations functionally contribute to you, guess what you can do with your ecosystem? You can build it as a team, not as an amorphous blob of lead gen where we just go, well, they're not giving us leads, so screw them.
Yeah. Oh, this is really interesting. So tell me about QuarqAI. What do you all do to help companies build a much better system?
Yeah, appreciate the question there. So QuarqAI is an ecosystem investment analytics platform. So I know didn't intend to create a category. Been part of two companies, one that tried and failed, one that did, and being a category creator is not the greatest thing in the world. But the reality is we've been building faster horses in partner technology for 20 years. And what I mean by that, Henry Ford, when they ask if I ask my customers what they want, they'd say faster horses. Well, CEOs, investors, execs only know how to ask for leads and revenue. What they really want is proof. And so we build that proof layer by leveraging AI, monitoring all those inputs and outputs, being able to create a deterministic number that is defensible mathematically to a CFO. I can show you where, the same stuff everybody can source and that, but also what is the empirical impact of your acceleration, your growth, and your retention, and then model that all into here's what we can prove, and here's what we can infer, and here's how we get to that proof point over time. Like, we can't see all of it now, we can infer it because we can see these edges, but to get to the point where you believe it, here's the roadmap to that. So that's that first side where we say we can see $100 million of total partner value, we can prove 60, here's the other 40, here's how we get to it. And so that's that first side. The other side of it is then we model out the risk and the upside, and then we're constantly alerting our customers as to where the value exchanges are. So it's no longer incumbent upon you and me to sit around, take notes, and then run back to our respective companies and try and herd cats. Like, once we identify a value exchange and we see that the two partners, you have a really strong fit for all those reasons that model these people out over here. You go, great, this is a fit. Alert everybody in that value chain. So I'm not chasing people anymore. Now we all know it's there. And now if you don't act on it, I have an evidence trail that says if we would have done X, Y, and Z, these are the likely outcomes, but I can't get action over here. So when we're having those conversations with our CFOs, CMOs, whomever, we're trying to get more resources, and we go, well, look, here was the upside. Here's what we wound up doing. This didn't work. Let's try this. Here are the numbers that back that up. So the idea here isn't, there's a million great tactical execution platforms out there in partnerships. I don't want to do that. I want those tools to be able to do what they're supposed to do. But like, if we could execute our way to success and belief at this point, we would have. Guess what? We're 20 plus years into this. Basically the beginning of cloud is when I mark ecosystem. 20 plus years into it, the failure rate stays exactly the same. That tells you there's a structural problem. It's not an execution problem. And that's what we keep talking about is execution. It ain't happening.
That's just great. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time today, and really appreciate all your insights. Is it okay if I share your contact details in the description below?
Absolutely.
And fantastic. Well, very good. It was absolutely super great comments, and looking forward to learning more about you and QuarqAI as we go forward.
Awesome. Thank you.